Coming up, the government has announced a Brexit Freedoms Bill to be put before Parliament. Further proof, as if anyone needed, that despite promises and claims by the liar Johnson, Brexit didn't actually get done on the 31st of January 2020 after all. Indeed, Brexit was still not done at the end of the transition period on 31st of December 2020. The very fact that Britain still needs such a piece of legislation to unleash the benefits of Brexit proves this. Stay tuned. If you enjoy these videos, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell, as it really does help me and the channel a lot. In the never-ending creep of conflating Tory party propaganda with official government announcements, a recent government press release, meaning it should not be tainted by party political agendas, reads, "Having regained our independence, we can now ensure that our regulations are tailor-made to the UK's own needs. However, under current rules, reforming and repealing this pipeline of outdated EU law would take several years because of the need for primary legislation for many changes, even if minor and technical. The new legislation will ensure that changes can be made more easily so that the UK can capitalise on Brexit freedoms more quickly." But what is so strange about this particularly partisan nationalistic nonsense is that it has no substance whatsoever. It has no content, no measurable proposals. It means diddly squat, with no concrete or specific actions or measures outlined at all. An extremely cynical sceptic, such as myself for example, might even be tempted to suspect that it is part of Johnson's Operation Red Meat, jingoistic right-wing fluff designed to fire up the anti-woke nationalistic sovereignty brigade. There seems to be even less solid and definable commitment to it than the levelling up white paper we've been promised. It's all sizzle and no sausage. The Brexit Freedoms Bill mentions nothing about the parlous state that Brexit has left British farming or fishing in, for example. As covered in a recent video, it doesn't address the City of London and the wider and massive UK financial sector, which is suffering a slow puncture ever since Brexit, with investment and jobs leaking to Amsterdam, Frankfurt and other European financial centres. Nothing in the statement about manufacturing, tourism, brewing or any of the other sectors massively harmed by Brexit. The government has announced that the Brexit Freedoms Bill will cut red tape and lead to savings of £1 billion, but it gives no explanation or proof of where these savings are coming from. But being Tories, one can only imagine that they're looking to do away with minimum health and safety standards and protections for consumers and workers in what they like to refer to as a bonfire of regulations. And the beneficiaries are unfailingly their cronies and donors in the private sector, maximising profits with minimum governmental oversight. And as the UK has learned to its cost under both this and previous Conservative administrations, these regulations are there for a reason. The tragic Grenfell disaster stands as a warning to us all of what happens when the Tories remove regulations governing the behaviour of private sector companies. Mad cow disease, the fatal BSE disaster, is another example that can be traced back to a relaxation of regulations relating in that case to processing of animal feed. The financial crisis of 2008 to 2009 happened because Blair's Labour government did nothing to reimpose banking watchdogs and reinstate financial checks, balances and oversight that the Conservative Thatcher administration had previously stripped away to allow the banking industry to self-regulate. What a terrible idea that was. Ditto the pensions mis-selling scandal and the PPI payment protection insurance scandal, all due to a bonfire of regulations carried out under previous Tory governments. But like it or not, and to be clear, I don't, all this was voted for in Parliament at the time. But it looks like the Brexit Freedoms Bill is being drafted to remove every single unwanted retained EU law without full scrutiny and votes in the Commons, let alone any input from the devolved governments in Edinburgh, Cardiff and Stormont. I mean, in the light of what I've said so far about previous government's zealous removal of minimum standards, what could possibly go wrong? Lib Dem MP Sarah Olney said, "This is sneaking through a bonfire of retained law without proper scrutiny. This is likely to end badly for farmers and businesses already shafted by this government. Meanwhile, the government has announced a booklet, rumoured to be around 100 pages, setting out the, quote, many benefits of Brexit, which feature the literally pint-sized so-called benefits of the crown mark on pint glasses that can only be exported if the EU standards mark is also there, or allowing pints of champagne that don't actually exist at the moment to be sold in British shops, and other claimed benefits like the COVID vaccine rollout and stronger animal welfare rules that were perfectly possible while we were still a member of the EU. Even the much-quoted freedom to remove VAT on energy bills, a so-called Brexit freedom which the Tory government has no intention of actually using, was one that could have been achieved as an EU member, as Spain has very visibly demonstrated only this very week, popping the very last balloon at the Brexit party. Anyone still cheering on Brexit at this point in history is either deluded or a liar. Asked about the plan earlier this week on LBC, Treasury Minister Simon Clarke said that Brexit has allowed us to get rid of a load of red tape. It has been a big success already. This provoked ridicule from the haulage and freight industries as lorry drivers continue to suffer many miles of tailbacks on both sides of the channel to get through the new Brexit checks at the channel ports. Checks that are set to get a whole lot worse, with further checks delayed until July and the new EU biometric checks taking between 15 and 20 minutes for every individual visitor from the UK being imposed towards the end of the year. Do you know, it's almost like we may have actually been better off staying as an EU member, isn't it? But on a serious note, as a closing thought, I believe the real purpose of the Brexit Freedoms Bill is to trash the level playing field enshrined in the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which Britain is obliged to provide in return for non-tariff access to EU markets. An attempt to unpick and renegotiate an agreed Brexit that even the Brexiteers don't much care for. 2 years after the oven-ready Brexit deal was popped in the oven, the Brexit Brigade are still trying to change the actual recipe. The level playing field provisions cover a wide range of minimum standards that the UK is meant to comply with in areas like taxation, labour and social standards, environmental protection, climate change and competition policy. Given the extreme right-wing cabal in the cabinet right now, would you trust this government not to weaken or even remove our basic rights and protections in these areas? I foresee an increasing tsunami of British sewage being dumped in British rivers, removal of the last remaining employment protection rights, a war against trade unions, and a further shift of power away from individual citizens and consumers, and towards the corporations and oligarchs who make up the vast bulk of donations to the Tory party.